Most people fear silence. Imagine sitting alone in a room where every sound has been swallowed. No traffic hums outside, no phone buzzes, no music, no voices, just the raw, unfiltered sound of your own breath. At first, it feels peaceful. Then, something shifts. Your throat tightens, your thoughts roar louder. A clock ticks inside your skull, counting seconds you've never noticed before. You check your phone, dead. You stand up, walk to the window, but the world outside is frozen, soundless. And suddenly you realize, the silence isn't outside, it's inside you, and it terrifies you. Why? Why does something as natural as silence feel like a threat? Why do we drown it out with podcasts, playlists, and endless scrolling? Why do we treat silence like a void, a darkness to be filled, instead of a mirror? This is not just a quirk of modern life. This is a primal rebellion against the one force that has always demanded the truth, the quiet. For centuries, philosophers have called silence the language of God, the scream of the soul, the unmade decision. Yet we flee it. We medicate against it. We would rather hear anything, even our own suffering, than sit with it. But here's the paradox. The quieter the world becomes, the louder your mind screams. And in that scream, you hear everything you've buried, every doubt, every regret, every version of yourself you've abandoned. Silence doesn't create emptiness, it reveals it. And what you discover there will rewrite the story of who you are. So let me ask you, what are you so afraid to hear? You are not afraid of silence. You are afraid of what it unlocks. Think of it this way. For 300,000 years, humans survived by listening. A rustle in the grass meant predator or prey. A snap in the dark meant danger. Silence was the anomaly, a warning that something was wrong. Biologically, we are wired to distrust it. Our brains even now treat silence like a glitch in the system, a void where threat could be hiding. But evolution alone doesn't explain the dread, the kind that crawls up your spine when you're alone with your thoughts, the kind that made Friedrich Nietzsche write, "When you stare into the abyss stares back." What is this abyss? Carl Jung called it the shadow. The parts of yourself you've disowned, buried, or labeled unworthy. The envy you deny. The rage you call stress. The grief you numb with distractions. Silence strips away the noise that keeps these fragments at bay. Without the buzz of a podcast or the glow of a screen, you're left alone with a self you've been trained to ignore. And here's the trap. We live in a world that profits from your fear of this confrontation. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer saw it first. He called life a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. Suffering when we don't get what we want, emptiness when we do. Modernity solved this by inventing a third-state perpetual distraction. Endless content, infinite scrolling, algorithms that feed you chaos to silence the chaos inside. But why does it work? Because distraction is a bargain. You trade the terror of self-awareness for the comfort of noise. You let Netflix characters live and die for you. You let TikTok trends define what matters. You outsource your inner life to influencers, gurus, and playlists curated to match your vibe. And in doing so, you surrender something vital, the right to your own mind. Jean-Paul Sartre put it brutally. We are condemned to be free, free to choose, free to create meaning, and free to feel the agony of that responsibility. Silence forces you to face this freedom. To ask, who am I when no one is watching? When nothing is demanding my attention? The answer is unsettling. You might not know. Aldous Huxley warned of a dystopia where people would learn to love their oppression. He wasn't wrong. We've built temples to distraction, churches of noise. We call it content, self-care, hustle. But strip away the branding, and it's just fear wearing a mask. Fear of the unanswered question, what if I'm not who I pretend to be? Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust by finding meaning in suffering, wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose." But what happens when we fill that space with noise? When we refuse to let the silence in, we become ghosts, haunted by versions of ourselves we've abandoned. Children aren't afraid of silence. They're afraid of monsters under the bed, tangible, definable threats. Adults fear the monsters inside the bed, the ones that whisper, "You're wasting your life," or "No one really loves you," or "You'll die unremarkable." We call this anxiety, depression, existential dread. But strip away the labels and it's just the shadow screaming to be heard. So we run. We work harder, scroll faster, stay louder. We turn ourselves into machines that never idle. But the abyss doesn't disappear. It grows. And the more you run, the more power you give it. This is the secret they never taught you. Silence isn't empty. It's alive. It's the last wild frontier in a world tamed by noise. The one place where you can't lie, perform, or hide. where every thought, every regret, every unlived dream rises like a moonlit tide. But what if that's not a curse? What if it's a doorway? You think you're choosing the noise. You're wrong. The fear of silence isn't a personal flaw, it's a product, a carefully engineered reflex. For decades, psychologists have known about the mere exposure effect. The more we encounter something, the more we prefer it, even if it harms us. Now imagine an entire society built on this principle. A world where every alarm ringtone, every push notification, every auto-playing video is designed to exploit your deepest biological wiring. This isn't conspiracy, it's capitalism. Your brain releases dopamine not when you find meaning, but when you find patterns, a new email, a new follower, a new episode. The rush isn't from the content, it's from the certainty of the next hit. Silence breaks that cycle. It yanks you out of the algorithm's rhythm and into the unknown. And the unknown, in a hyper-connected world, feels like death. Here's the cruel irony. The brain regions that light up in silence are the same ones that atrophy when neglected. The default mode network, responsible for introspection, empathy, and meaning-making, weakens when drowned in constant stimulus. Like a muscle, it needs stillness to grow. But we've been taught to treat stillness as laziness. And so, we drift into what philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls the burnout society, not from oppression but from self-exploitation. We punish ourselves for wasting time thinking. We pathologize daydreaming as dissociation. We medicate children for staring out windows. Why? Because a mind that questions, that wanders, that wonders is harder to control. This is how the cage works. It convinces you that the hunger you feel, the ache for something real, is a problem to be solved. Buy this, watch that, post this. The solution is always more noise. But the hunger isn't a glitch, it's a compass. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Hell is other people." He was half right. Hell is the version of yourself you create for other people. The persona that laughs at jokes it doesn't find funny. That nods at opinions it doesn't respect. That stays productive to avoid asking, what is this all for? The longer you wear the mask, the harder it is to remember your face. Every time you silence a thought, you bury a part of yourself. Every time you numb a feeling, you burn a bridge to your soul. And the more you do it, the more you become a stranger in your own life. But the cage has cracks. Neuroscientists have discovered that just 2 minutes of silence a day can regenerate neurons damaged by chronic stress. Buddhist monks have known this for millennia. Their brains, MRI scans show, glow with gamma waves linked to heightened awareness during meditation. Silence isn't passive, it's transformative. A rebellion against the lie that you must stay busy to matter. Yet society dismisses this as woo, calls it privilege, mocks it as the luxury of the idle. Why? Because a population that thinks deeply, that questions freely, that feels intensely, cannot be sold cheap solutions. Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. But what if the space itself has been colonized? What if every quiet moment is pre-filled with podcasts, playlists, and mindfulness apps that sell you back your own attention? This is the ultimate betrayal. We've turned silence into a product. A $20 meditation app subscription, a $300 noise-canceling headset, a $5,000 silent retreat. We've monetized the very thing that could free us. But there's a secret they can't commodify. Silence is a birthright. It's the primal state you were born into. The blank page before the world wrote its demands on you. You don't need permission to reclaim it, you don't need an app to access it, you just need to stop running. The cage is real, but so is the key, and it's been in your hands all along. Rebellion doesn't always look like a revolution. Sometimes it looks like stopping. For centuries we've been taught that freedom comes from adding, more knowledge, more choices, more control. But what if freedom lies in subtraction? In stripping away the layers of noise, expectation, and performance until all that's left is you? This isn't self-help, this is unhelp. The deliberate dismantling of everything you've been told you need to be. The first act of rebellion is simple. Do nothing. Not meditation, not journaling, not mindfulness, just nothing. Sit, stare. Let your mind thrash like a wild animal in a trap. Let it scream that you're wasting time, that you'll fall behind, that you're failing at life. Do not move. Why? Because in that void you'll meet the architect of your cage, the belief that your worth depends on your productivity, that your value is measured in outputs, likes, and milestones. This is the lie that turns silence into an enemy. Philosopher Albert Camus argued that the only real philosophical question is whether to live or die. But here's the twist. Most people choose a third option, to exist in the numb middle, to avoid the question entirely. Silence drags you back to the fork in the road. Live or die. Choose. You've been conditioned to fear the open door, to prefer the certainty of confinement to the terror of freedom. Soren Kierkegaard called this the dizziness of freedom, the nausea we feel when faced with infinite possibilities. But what if that dizziness is the antidote? History's greatest rebels didn't fight systems. They fought the fear of emptiness. Henry David Thoreau didn't go to Walden Pond to find himself. He went to lose the self society had imposed on him. Vincent van Gogh painted starry nights not because he loved the sky, but because the silence of madness forced him to see differently. Frida Kahlo turned bedridden agony into art not through positivity, but by staring into the abyss of her pain until it stared back and blinked. Rebellion is not grand, it's granular. It's the 90-second pause before you check your phone in an elevator. The walk without a podcast, the meal eaten alone without a screen. These are acts of defiance in a world that profits from your discomfort with stillness. But be warned, the cage will fight back. Your brain, wired by decades of conditioning, will scream that you're regressing. Friends will call you weird. Your own thoughts will gaslight you. Is this all there is? Here's the truth they don't want you to know. Boredom is the birthplace of genius. Studies show that people who tolerate boredom score higher in creativity, emotional intelligence, and problem solving. Why? Because boredom forces the mind to wander, to make connections between seemingly unrelated ideas. It's the mental equivalent of cross-pollination. But in a world addicted to instant answers, we've sterilized the soil of our minds. The second act of rebellion: question the sacred. Why do we worship hustle? Why do we equate suffering with virtue? Why do we call staring at screens work and staring at clouds laziness? These are not truths. They're choices. Ones made by empires that profit from your exhaustion. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote his deepest insights not in palaces, but on battlefields, in stolen moments of silence between bloodshed. He understood that clarity doesn't come from removing chaos, but from finding stillness within it. You don't need a cabin in the woods. You need one breath without reaching for your phone. The final act of rebellion: let silence rewrite your story. We think we're afraid of the dark, but really we're afraid of the light that the dark reveals, the light of truths we've avoided. That love requires risk, that meaning demands uncertainty, that being alive hurts, and that's okay. Japanese concept of ma, the space between, the pause between notes that makes music, the silence between words that creates meaning. This is where life actually happens. Not in the milestones, but in the gaps. The breath after the laugh, the moment before the kiss, the heartbeat before the decision. You've been taught to fear these gaps, to fill them with emojis, small talk, and Spotify playlists. But what if you let them be? What if you stopped treating your life like a resume to polish and started treating it like a poem to savor? Line break by line break? The rebellion isn't out there, it's in here. In the space between what you are and what you've been told to be. In the silence between heartbeats. In the courage to stop, to listen, to be. This is where the road ends, not with answers, not with epiphanies, but with a question so ancient it hums in your bones. Who are you when no one is watching? Not the you shaped by resumes, Instagram captions, or polite dinner conversations. Not the you that laughs at the right moments, nods at the right lies, the other you. The one that existed before they told you to fear the quiet. The one that knows deep down that silence was never the enemy, it was the invitation. Civilizations rise and fall, algorithms decay, the noise always dies. But silence? Silence is the oldest language, the first breath, the last heartbeat. It's what remains when all the lies exhaust themselves. For years you've mistaken this truth for a threat. You thought the monsters in the quiet would devour you. But here's the final, terrifying revelation. The monsters were you all along, the parts you exiled, the gifts you called too much, the love you dismissed as naive, the rage you bottled as professionalism. Silence didn't create these fragments, it revealed them, and in doing so it offered you the one thing noise never could, a chance to begin again. You were born into silence, before language, before shame, before the world etched its demands into your skin. Your first act was a scream, not of fear, but of pure, unfiltered being. Somewhere along the way you learned to confuse that purity with weakness, to mistake stillness for surrender. But look closer. A seed grows in silence. A galaxy spins in silence. A heart heals in silence. All of life's most sacred acts happen beyond words. Why would your life be any different? This is the ultimate truth. Silence is not the absence of noise. It's the presence of everything noise has been hiding. Your grief, your joy, your power. The parts of you that don't fit into spreadsheets or self-help books. The parts that can't be monetized, optimized, or turned into content. The parts that make you dangerously alive. The poet Rumi wrote, "Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." The same applies to silence. You don't need to find it. You need to stop running from it. At the end, everyone understands. The meetings that seemed urgent, forgotten. The followers that felt vital, gone. What remains is what always mattered, the unspoken love, the unsung laughter, the quiet moments you dismissed as ordinary. Why wait until death to live this truth? You are not here to outrun the quiet. You are here to let it remake you. To sit in the wreckage of your certainties and whisper, "Show me what I've been missing." To let the silence strip you bare, not as punishment, but as homecoming. To realize at last that the peace you've been chasing wasn't in the next vacation, promotion, or relationship. It was here, now, in the breath you're holding, the pause you're rushing through, the ache you've been numbing. The dawn isn't coming, it's already here. I have lived with silence for decades. Let me tell you what I've learned. It does not want your fear, it wants your attention. Unknown.